Welcome back. This is Election 23 Road to the Beehive. I'm Mark Leishman. Well, let's take a look now at what David Parker had to say. Tim McCready is a business journalist and business strategy consultant. He has a science background. He's worked with global corporates and startups in the agri sector, both here in New Zealand and overseas, and he loves politics. So, Tim, what were your impressions of David Parker?
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I think it was a really great interview. It's so rare these days that we get those long form interviews, especially with incumbent ministers. And I think you had the best part of 40 minutes or so with him. And it was great that you could explore some of those issues that clearly he's really deeply passionate about. You know, he spoke about how much he enjoys the outdoors and the work that he's done in the rural sector. I think he came across as really engaged and really across the detail, which I think is particularly commendable because some of those portfolios, transport, for example, he only picked up about 3 months ago when he was handed that from Michael Wood.
Yes, indeed. In fact, actually, Tim, he said to me afterwards, he actually thanked me, which is kind of unusual, but he said it's very rare for him to do an interview, anything like that. He says if you're lucky, you might get 15 minutes or 10 minutes on Q&A, but so that was nice. I appreciated hearing that. But he discussed how his comment about hating farmers was kind of taken out of context. And do you think that kind of thing is becoming possibly more widespread and an issue in politics?
Yeah, he was absolutely right about that. I think it is getting worse and worse. And I think it is unfortunate because it's a lot of noise, and the very best politicians, and I'd put David Parker in that mix, is when they can really share, and have a contest of ideas in an election campaign. But this kind of thing is just a distraction, and I think it is really unfortunate. But yeah, it's getting worse and worse. We'll see a lot more of it, particularly in the US election next year, I'm sure.
Oh gosh, yes. I dread the thought of it coming, actually. But anyway, it is a pretty tough environment, obviously, out there for Labor at the moment. They're not winning much anywhere, it seems, particularly in the polls. So how do you think David Parker went with those questions I asked about the reforms, about the fact that the farmers are really grumpy at so much sort of detail and regulation and compliance?
Yeah, I think, you do have to feel a little bit for him. He's clearly, as I said, passionate about what he's doing and genuinely wants to do what is best. And I think he made a good case for all of the points that you raised. Those RMA reforms he's been working on for a really long time. They've had more than something like 5 years of public consultation and deliberation, and it could all be for nothing, right? ACT's made this commitment to repeal the acts before Christmas. And that seems a bit disingenuous because it needs to be replaced with something, but we don't necessarily know what that will be. But I do think that David was right when he said that at least some elements, if not the name of the acts, will be retained.
What about his comments about the school contract for the carpets, the synthetic carpet tiles, rather than good old Kiwi wool?
Yeah, it's not really a good look, is it? Using petroleum-based carpet from an American-based company, particularly when we're meant to be talking about sort of living in a sustainable way, and clearly not much more sustainable than wool from New Zealand. But I think they're in a tricky position there because they're getting hit from the other side of politics around costs and the amount that they're spending. So it's sort of it's a double-edged sword there for them. I liked the point that he made about making your own sustainable choices and pointing out his wool suit and cotton shirt. Whether or not that's enough, I don't know.
Now, we did speak about the ETS and why New Zealand should have to step up when some of the other bigger countries aren't really playing their part, it seems. Do you think he answered that well?
Yeah, I think he did. He laid out several reasons why that's important. World War II was an interesting one that I hadn't heard that sort of comparison before, but probably fair enough. I think the point that he made that I think resonated really well for me is the fact that consumers around the world are making more informed choices, and they're really looking behind the labels to see whether or not things like food is being produced in a really sustainable way. So I think that's just becoming more and more important if New Zealand wants to stay ahead. And then, of course, that point he made about the free trade agreements, the European, the UK free trade agreement requires that we make efforts in sustainability. And so we'll just be shut out from those markets if we don't continue to do more.
So the election now just weeks away. Did you kind of get a sense of what he's thinking about the outcome and perhaps his own future?
Yeah, it's hard to get a read on this, isn't it? I mean, I guess David Parker has been around for such a long time. I actually found it really interesting during that interview that he referenced several times, the work that he did way back in, I think he came into Parliament in 2002 under Helen Clark. So he's had that longevity. And I think, I guess when you have that longevity, you've been around in government, but also in opposition for such a long amount of time, you kind of, how to read the polls. So I think he probably... he's probably quite realistic about that. And he'll probably be quite philosophical if he does find himself in opposition. Perhaps he'll find himself with a bit more time for those hobbies that he mentioned he enjoys doing.
That's a political analyst, Tim McCready there, and that is our program. Thanks to Labour Minister for the Environment, David Parker. I'm Mark Leishman, and this has been Election 23, Road to the Beehive.
Brought to you by Sky Country Media, rural marketing specialists and producers of Country TV.